Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name's Katie. So today I thought I'd do a fun video and do a full face of makeup using my least favourite products of 2020. So I should have just uploaded 2 videos talking about my favourite products for 2020, and I did mention that I might do a video filming a full face, just applying the products I didn't like this year and see if I can make like the best out of a bad situation. So that is what we're gonna do. I really want to see if I can sort of glow up because I'm not feeling the most attractive today, so it's gonna be a challenge to glow up with products that I don't like. But you know what? I'm willing to accept this challenge. I want to see how good I can make this work. As always, I would start with eyeshadow, which means I need to use my least favourite concealer as an eye base. So out of all the concealers that I tried, I would say these 2 are probably my least favourite. So I've got the Rimmel Lasting Matte Concealer. Not a big fan of this guy. Not the best coverage, not the best finish, just didn't get along with this guy. Also, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Nip and Fab one that I tried more recently. The finish is okay, like it's reasonably hydrating, but it's just really not very good coverage, and I'm all about full coverage concealer. Spoiler alert to later in the video, I will be using the Rimmel Lasting Matte Foundation as my least favourite foundation, so for that reason I think I will use the Nip and Fab as my concealer, just for a bit more variety. So I'm just going to use this wet as an eyeshadow base, and then obviously we will use this on the rest of my face either. Also, colour wise, it's not a particularly good colour match either, and this was the light shade. Although to be fair, I did try and buy a white concealer because I do have this in a white shade, but for some reason they sent me like a completely different shade when I ordered it. My least favourite eyeshadow palettes this year would be these 3. So I've got the Kami Make Magic palette from Revolution. Just off the bat, I don't mean this is a terrible palette or anything. I did think some of these foiled shades at the bottom were actually really stunning. I think it was just more so the mattes that kind of let me down here. More so just these like bottom 2 rows that I wasn't that impressed with, but some of these foiled shades are stunning and I kind of want to like depop them and put them in another palette, but I just feel like overall this wasn't a very consistent palette. Also, this little guy from Pop Beauty I wasn't the biggest fan of. First of all, it's got quite a few pressed glitters in, and I'm really not a big fan of pressed glitters. There's also only 1 matte in it, which is really annoying. I mean, the matte is this sort of reddy brown. It's not too bad, to be fair, and I've just shoved my nail in it. Shimmers aren't awful. Some are better than others. Some of them are just sort of kind of a bit mediocre. Some of them are okay, but overall it's just not really a great palette, and also it's just very limited. There's not really a lot you can do with it. There's only like a handful of shades, like maybe 3 or 4 that I actually think are okay quality in that. And this one from You Can Be, the Back to School palette, again, I don't think this is an awful palette. For me, it was more so the shimmers in this that I didn't like. I actually thought most of the mattes were like quite decent, like the yellows and the greens and the reds were actually not bad. I didn't mind those, but I feel like the shimmers had a really strange texture. You can kind of see the mess I've made with this one. I had that weird sort of moussey texture, which I just personally don't get along with. There's this weird one with sequencing, which was like kind of unusable. And a lot of the shimmers just really did not do it for me. So, as I said, some of the shades in this were okay, but just overall, not a very consistent palette. These are the only 3 that really stood out to me as not being particularly good, but as I said, they're not complete duds. See, I feel for this to be like a worst of 2020, I should use the shades that I don't like as opposed to going for the shades that I knew that I liked from these palettes. Makes me think so I should probably use the shimmers in here because I didn't really like the shimmers, and maybe use the mattes from the Kami palette because I didn't really get along with the mattes. So I think I'm probably gonna do that because I want to make this difficult for myself. I'm gonna start with this pale brownie matte shade here and just use that in the crease area. When I've used this before, I would use it with like a set base instead of a wet concealer base, so the shades might perform a little bit better today. Well, that's not too bad to be fair. I'm going to go in with this more sort of caramelly brown shade here and use that underneath. I'm going to go in with this sort of plummy maroony shade here and use that underneath. And I'm going to use this black shade here. I mean, to be fair, those shades that I have used weren't actually that bad. Like, I felt like they've performed like pretty decently. I mean, they are the more neutral shades though, which I feel like are generally more easy to formulate. Probably should have gone with some of the more colourful mattes actually, I think, to prove the point. So I'm going to go back to the Nip and Fab concealer and do a little bit of a cut crease, and then we'll switch to the Back to School palette. Okay, so I'm going to use the shade Chemistry, which is the gold one here, and put that over the cut crease. I seem to remember not... Yeah, it's one of those weird texture shimmers. Okay, and let's try Psychology, which is another strange textured shimmer. It's like a dark blue sort of colour. And put that in the rest of the cut crease. Okay, so none of these palettes really have like a good shade to put under the brow bone. The closest thing we have is this mess of a shimmer in this Back to School palette. So I guess I'm going to give that a go. I don't know, highlighting the brow bone. Okay, so that's the eyeshadow done. It's not turned out too badly, to be fair, so considering I was using my least favourite palettes, the eyeshadow is like not bad, to be honest. So moving on to kohl eyeliner. So my least favourite kohl eyeliners from the year would be, well, the one I'm going to use today is the Revlon Colour State Micro Hyper Precision Gel Eyeliner. So this is just like a twisty up eyeliner pen, except it's tiny. It's like sort of the format of a micro brow pencil, and it's just really bad. It's just not pigmented. It's uncomfortable to apply in the waterline, and it doesn't even work that well on the lash line either. Just really did not like this. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Gosh Velvet Touch eyeliner, but I had a look and I feel like I must have decluttered that or something because it's not in my collection anymore. Also the Flower Beauty Twisty Up one, I wasn't the biggest fan of that because it disappeared in like a couple weeks. It just ran out so fast. So I'm going to apply this Revlon one that I do not like into my waterlines, and this is going to be very uncomfortable. But here we go. I mean, can you even see that in my waterline? Barely, because it's so faint. And it took ages just to get that minimal pigment, so you know. For liquid liner, I think I only tried about 2 this year, and I really fell in love with the You Can Be liquid liner. The other one I tried was the Kiko one, and I really didn't get along with this one that well. The applicator's fine, but I just found that this was a sort of eyeliner that would dry out like whilst you were using it, and you'd have to keep like shaking it, putting the lid back on, this, that and the other, just to get any like pigment from it. It's just a bit of an awkward one to apply, but I'm going to try my best to do a little baby wing on this guy. Okay, that liquid liner application really did not go well. There was some patchiness, there was just some very faint pigment, but here we are. Okay, so I just realised that I did a big mascara declutter about a month ago, so I actually kind of threw out all of my least favourite ones from this year. So some of which being the Revolution Big Lash Mascara, didn't get along with that one very well. I tried 2 mascaras from Kiko. One was called the Immeasurable Length and the other was the Tuscan Sunshine 3-in-1 mascara. Didn't get along with those. Didn't get along with the Fiera mascara that I tried. But I decluttered all of them, which makes this video a little bit difficult. So I think I'm going to use the You Can Be mascara. This wasn't one of my favourites. I didn't love this, but I wouldn't say it was one of my least favourites. The ones I mentioned before were, I disliked those more, but I didn't really like this one loads, and it's still in my collection, so I'm just going to have to use this guy. It's the You Can Be mascara. So I'm just going to apply this to my top lashes. I feel kind of bad for including this as the worst mascara because as you can see it's actually not that bad. Like, it has got a decent amount of volume. It's very lengthening, definitely, but it's literally the worst one that I have left in my collection just by default. It's not actually that bad a mascara. Obviously if it was that bad I would have decluttered it with the rest of them, so there you go. So moving on to base primers, I think I tried probably about 5 or 6 primers, so I didn't try loads, but of all the ones that I tried, this is the one that I got along with the least. So it's from Flower Beauty. It's a Supernova Celestial Skin Alexa. It's good job I don't have an Alexa because that will be going off right now. Elixir. The thing I don't like about this is it's just so oily. I feel like it just turns your face into an oil slick. It's like rubbing olive oil all over your face, and it's like, no, because I'm not putting my face in an oven. It's also very glittery as well. I just don't like what this does to my skin, but it's our least favourite, so it's going on. Just lovely oily face. Just what I like. I'll give it something for having a really nice like botanical smell. I really like that. I'm a big fan of like a botanical sort of smell. Hence why I am a gin drinker. But yeah, let's give that about 5 hours to settle into my skin. Okay, so moving on to foundations. So I feel like most of the foundations I tried this year were just quite like average, like decent, but nothing special. Obviously I did have about 3 favourites, which you obviously talked about in my favourites videos, but there was only really one that I feel like stood out to me. It's just straight up a bad, like awful foundation, and that's this guy from Rimmel. It's their Lasting Matte Foundation. I think it is like a newer reformulation from the last year. I was really looking forward to this because I'm a big fan of matte foundations. They'd obviously extended the colour range a bit. I was like, this could be really good, but I don't like it. It's just, it doesn't look good. It looks patchy. The coverage isn't great. It's sort of like, it's really bad if you've got like blemishy skin because it sort of gathers around your blemishes and doesn't really cover them. And as you can see, I've especially got blemishes today, so this isn't going to look good on my skin at all. The shade I've got is 0.5 Alabaster, which is the lightest shade, and I'll give it something for the fact that it is quite pale. It actually is a little bit too pale for me. It's a very like moussey formula, which I've not got anything against, but it just does not work with this guy. It's also very fragranced. So let's just get the best application we possibly can on this guy. This just straight up looks bad. Like, this looks just awful on my skin. It's not covered my blemishes at all. It's just not a remotely flattering finish. It just looks bad. This is generally one of the worst foundations I've ever tried, I'm not gonna lie. As I mentioned before, the Rimmel Stay Matte Concealer I also am not a fan of, but I am gonna stick with the Nip and Fab, and this is not gonna give us much additional coverage, to be honest, but maybe it will help the foundation a little bit. Obviously it's quite a bit orangey compared to the foundation too, so it might make it match me a little bit more, considering the foundation is very pale. God, my skin is gonna look so bad. So if you like eyes are fine. Skin, I'm not sure that the skin can be saved with these products, to be honest. Well, that helped a little, not a lot. I still have like the worst coverage ever, and it just doesn't look good. And setting powder is not going to help us either. Okay, so for setting powder, I have decluttered a few of my least favourites. So there was the Kiko Tuscan Sunshine. It's just a pressed translucent powder. I thought that was bad. It just didn't do anything. It was so like tightly pressed into the pan that barely any powder came off it, and it just did nothing. It didn't mattify properly. It just didn't do anything good. There were 2 powders I tried from Gosh. So there's this one here, which is the Prime and Set Mattifying Hyaluronic Acid Hydration Powder. God, there's so many words written on this. And I did try, I think it was called their Waterproof Setting Powder, which I did declutter because that one literally just turned my face bright orange. I didn't really like this one much either, so I think I might use this one today. Also the XX Revolution one I didn't really like that much either. It just oxidized. I just didn't really like the finish of it. And also it just flew everywhere. Like, oh my god, I'm just holding the packaging and it's literally powder flying everywhere. Made a huge mistake. I'm going to use the Gosh one today. I don't like this. Again, I think this also oxidizes your makeup. It wasn't as bad as the waterproof one, but I still didn't really like this one much either. But you know what? Let's use it today. Alright, so I'm just going to go ahead, set my under eyes, switch to a brush for the rest of my face. And this is going to look awful. Okay, so this is perhaps the worst base makeup I've ever seen on my face. It looks so grainy and So moving on to bronzers, I've got two least favourites. They're both Revolution products actually. So one of them is the Revolution Pro NAF bronzer in the shade Architeco. It looks like this. The shade just did not work for me, and I wasn't the biggest fan of the formula either. It could come out a bit patchy sometimes. And then we've got the XX Revolution bronzer, which I didn't really have issues with the formula of this, but I just found the shade just did not work for me. It's a shade Demo. It is the lightest shade, I believe, and it just didn't really work for me. My least favourite blush was also one of the Pro NAF ones. This is the Mia Kiss blush. So I think I'll use the XX Revolution one just so that I'm not just using these two. I didn't really have an issue with the formula. It was just the shade, really. It's just very red. Just a bit too dark for me, but base already looks awful, so... Back to blush, I tried probably about 5 or maybe 6 blushes this year, and honestly I liked all of them. This is the only one that I wasn't the biggest fan of. I think it was just like a little bit too pigmented and not the most flattering for me. So I'm gonna pop it on anyway. Yeah, it just doesn't really blend out the best either. Okay, so for highlight, there's two that stand out to me as not very good. They're both palettes actually. So one is quite recent. This one's quite recent to me. It's the Technic Prism Princess Powders. This is just really bad pigmentation. Pans are also very small and like deep, so it's really hard to get your brush into them. Yeah, I just really was not impressed with this. And I was also very underwhelmed by this palette from e.l.f. So it's the Glow Gleam Beam palette. It just really wasn't very pigmented. It was just meh. And then this shade up here was literally just like glitter. It's just glitter. That's it, and it's not even pigmented glitter. I'm gonna use the e.l.f. palette. I'll use this shade here, which I feel like I could get something out of this shade at least, but definitely far from a favourite highlighter. Yeah, it doesn't really look like I have highlighter on, although to be honest, that is also the setting powder. Another problem I had with that Gosh setting powder is it really just makes your highlight not show up well. But I mean, even if I wasn't using this powder, it's still not particularly pigmented highlighter palette anyway. Okay, so moving on to eyebrows, when it comes to gels, I actually found quite a lot of gels that I really just did not like at all. So there's one from a brand called Holika Holika, which I have decluttered because I cannot find that in my collection. There's this one from Dermacol, it's just called their eyebrow mascara. There's the XX Revolution eyebrow gel. There's the regular Revolution brow gel, as well as the one that's got cannabis sativa in it, and then the Rude Cosmetics eyebrow gel mascara. What these all have in common is they're just so thick, so pigmented, there's so much excess on them. You just cannot get a natural fluffy brow with these. It's just gonna look like you've drawn your brows on with a marker pen. So yeah, spoilt for choice, the least favourite eyebrow gels here. I'm gonna use the Dermacol one just because I don't feel like I used this a lot on my channel, if at all, really. So let's give this one a go. It's not good, really. It's just so thick and pigmented. The colour is just so intense. The wand is pretty nice. I'll give it something for that, but the amount of excess product that I'm going to have to wipe off this is ridiculous. Look at all that excess. But nonetheless, let's try our best here. Okay, so for micro brow pencils, I have two least favourite ones. So one was from Catrice, I think it's called like their Slimatic brow pencil. It was a micro brow pencil. I didn't like it because literally every time I used it, it snapped. It just was not firm or secure at all, and it just didn't have a good like effect on the brows either. That one is decluttered, I think mainly because I used it all up because it snapped every time I used it. A more recent one in my collection, this Technic one, I'm not the biggest fan of this just because I feel like it comes out quite red on the brows. It's just not a particularly flattering colour. The formula is meh, it's okay, it's not the best, it's not the worst, but this is what we're going to be using today. These brows are a little bit more structure. They're not going to look good. Okay, so moving back to eyes, I'm going to be surprised if any eyeshadow actually shows up on my under eyes because of the setting powder I use. As I said, it has a really bad habit of just making products not show up on top of it. But let's try anyway. I'm probably just going to stick to the same transition shades I used in the palette. So the lighter brown, the more caramel brown, and then the maroon and the black. So I'm just going to do a little concoction of those under there and we'll see if they actually show up at all. Okay, so surprisingly the under eyeshadow did show up, so well, that's something, I guess. I'm gonna go back to the e.l.f. palette and put the same shade I used earlier in my inner corners. Okay, so back to the You Can Be mascara. I'm gonna do my bottom lashes. Okay, so for lips, my least favourite products, I would say, so I got these lipsticks from Kiko. These are their Velvet Passion matte lipsticks. I've got them in 2 shades. I didn't like these because they were so shiny and they just weren't matte at all. And I seem to remember them being like a little bit sort of like patchy and streaky looking. Also this guy from Maybelline, so this is like a super pale shade, I think. But the Colour Sensational, the matte lipsticks, this is in Purely Nude. And again, it's a super pale shade, but it just looked so patchy on the lips and just not flattering at all. And it also was not matte in the slightest either. I think I'll use the darker shade I have of the Kiko one, which is quite, I mean, I like the shade. It's a very grungy, like dark brown sort of shade, very like matte stone. So I think I'll use this and then layer the Maybelline Nude shade. It's gonna look awful, but you know what? Kind of the point of the video, right? Okay, so that's the Kiko on its own. Like, I feel like it's not very opaque. It's like quite faint, the colour payoff, and it's just a little bit too, like, it's not super shiny or anything, but it's just not as matte as I would like something that describes itself as matte to be. It's gonna make it look even worse, but let's add a little bit of our Maybelline over it. Let's salvage a little bit of matteness and tap a tiny bit of our Gosh powder over those lips. Okay, so that is everything applied for our worst of 2020 look. So I'm just gonna dry my hair and clean up any mess I've made, and I'll be back. Okay, so we are back with the finished look of Full Face with my least favourite products from 2020. I don't feel like the eyeshadow looks too bad, and the mascara looks fine, but I mean, I literally did say that wasn't my least favourite mascara because I'd thrown all those away, so that looks fine. The liquid eyeliner and the eyeliner in the waterline looks pretty awful, to be honest, but the actual eyes overall, I feel that like aren't too bad. The base is absolutely awful, like none of my blemishes are covered whatsoever. You can see everything still, and it just looks hella grainy. Eyebrows aren't, I mean, they're quite thick, but they're not that bad considering. The lips aren't the best, but again, they could look worse. Overall, the look's not too bad. I'd never wear this base makeup on a night out or a day out or anywhere where I wanted my skin to look nice. I'd never ever wear this base makeup. I'm not gonna lie, probably a lot of this makeup will get decluttered the next time I do a makeup declutter. I'm looking forward to a brand new year of trying out new products as well as playing around with older products in my collection, because I definitely need to do that a lot more. I am gonna do a video talking about what products I want to buy in 2021, so that will be my next video. So thank you for watching this one, and I'll see you in my next one. Goodbye.